Okay, so today has been a pretty crazy world in pickleball, and we still don't have a ton of information yet. But if you haven't already heard, carbon paddles are officially banned from all USAPA sanctioned events. So this morning, while the US Open was happening, apparently the carbon paddle got put through the USAPA approval test again. It sounds like there may have been some reports about it needing to be retested. The information is still very unclear, but regardless, it got retested and it failed the test and was immediately banned from any use in the US Open and all USAPA events. If you look on the USAPA website for the list of approved paddles, the Carbon is no longer on that list. And that includes both models, both the Carbon 1 and the Carbon 2 13 and 16 millimeter versions. So if you own a Carbon right now, you cannot use it in an official sanctioned USAPA tournament. And this is completely crazy to hear. As far as I know, this is the only paddle that this has happened to where a paddle got approved and then completely banned. I know there have been reports that this happened to Electrum where they had a batch of paddles that were over the limit of grit they could have, but I don't believe there was ever a point where they got banned for it. I believe they just had to go make a new batch that was under the limit. But even the details on that one are still a little bit fuzzy. We don't really know, and that was a little bit ago at this point. That's nothing recent. So it's completely crazy that this happened because one, the US Open is one of the biggest tournaments, probably the biggest pickleball tournament in the world right now. And then halfway through it, one of the most popular paddles on the market gets banned, even after other people had meddled with it already. And really, I don't think there was much of a better way for the USAPA to handle this. I mean, if you look at the situation, it's a lose-lose, right? If you ban it after the US Open, then anyone who meddled with that paddle, the people who lost to them are going to be super angry that the USAPA knew about the information and then chose not to ban it during the tournament. But if you're a Carbon user, you're going to be extremely upset that halfway through your day, or even if you're playing the next day, your paddle gets banned. What if you don't have a backup? I mean, I'm sure you can find someone who will loan you a paddle or something, but it's still a huge loss. So really, I don't know what the best way to handle this was. I feel like the way the USAPA did it was probably the best way. I'm not entirely sure about that, but again, you're really not going to win no matter how you do this. If you do it after, people are going to complain. If you do it during, people are going to complain. And like I said, there's not a whole lot of official information about this right now, but from Mark Pfeiffer, who I believe is on the rules committee for the USAPA, don't quote me on that, but I believe that is correct. He said in a Facebook group, the Carbon paddle was removed from the approved paddle list this morning. It's very unusual for a previously approved paddle to be later removed. This affects every tournament underway that elects to abide by the rules and the approved paddle list to maintain an open playing field for players, not just the US Open. And a lot of people are really angry about this. One of the things people are starting to ask is, well, then I want a refund from the USAPA because the paddle got banned. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. The USAPA didn't do anything wrong. They simply found out that a paddle didn't meet their requirements anymore and had to do something about it because it was over the limit. The one that I think people probably should be mad at is Carbon, because they're the ones that let their paddle get out of spec, whether intentionally or unintentionally. I can't claim that it went either way, so don't go pointing fingers at anyone. But that's what happened, right? Like, whoever makes their paddles started going out of spec and let those paddles out into the wild. That isn't the USAPA's fault. They simply just found out that they weren't meeting spec and then did something about it. Now, one thing people have been saying in the Facebook groups is, well, if it got approved, then how on earth could you ban it later? That's the USAPA's fault for having a bad approval system. And again, I don't think that's the way that you should look at it. Likely what happened, again, intentionally or unintentionally, no one has any way of knowing, is Carbon probably had sent in some paddles, those had been approved, and then later, the manufacturer that makes them made them out of spec, whether that was too much grit or the ball got absorbed into the face too much, which allowed it to bounce off the paddle more, or something entirely different. We don't know what got it banned, but all that matters is it can be unapproved later because it was out of spec. Just because it got approved at some point doesn't mean things didn't change later. If a company really wanted to be dirty about this and have a paddle that performed even better for players, They could easily send in something that was below the grit requirement for the USAPA, get it approved, and then have, 1,000, 10,000 paddles manufactured that are double the grit limit, and then send those out. Obviously, people are going to start to be like, wow, this gets a ton of spin, like with what happened with Carbon. And then, the USAP is not just going to go retest every single paddle because they're getting good reviews. It's not until some information is given to them that probably gives them a reason to doubt that it might be legal, and then retest it. So if a company wanted to have ill intent, that is one way they could do it. But again, just remember, we don't actually know that it's even the grit. Everyone's assuming it's the grit because Carbon is so well known for spin, but no one has actually said the reason that they aren't approved anymore. So everything is just speculation at this point. Now, another thing I'm seeing on the forums is people say, well, Engage, Electrum, Yola, they're all using the same surface, so then you need to ban those as well. And again, that's really not entirely true, because just because they use the same type of surface does not mean they are the same type of grittiness or that the spec is exactly the same. If you feel an Engage, a Carbon, an Electrum, and a Yola all with your hand, they all feel different. Engage feels the least gritty, followed by Electrum, then probably Yola, and then Carbon. I'm a little fuzzy on the Yola and the Carbon comparison because I don't actually own a Carbon myself, so I haven't been able to actually feel the Yola and the Carbon side by side. But based on memory, that's about where I would place them. So yes, they are the same style of surface, but the grittiness is absolutely not the same between them. So just remember that. Just because it's the same style of surface does not mean you're going to get the same type of result from them. Now, another thing with something like the 002, which is getting amazing spin, people are saying, well, that gets even more spin, so then you need to ban it. And again, you can't really base it off of spin alone, right? Because there are multiple factors that go into getting a paddle approved through the USAPA. And this is just from what I've heard, so don't take this as absolute gospel, but I've heard it from enough sources to believe that it's probably accurate at this point. And that is that there is a grit approval system you need to go through for the USAPA, and then a friction test for your paddle as well. So maybe you pass the friction test, but you don't pass the grit test, or vice versa. So maybe with the Carbon, it's something where it didn't pass the friction test, but it passed the grit, and then maybe the ball absorbs into the face not as much. Whereas maybe something like the 002 is literally on the edge of all three of those, where the ball can go into the face quite a bit and then bounce off of, which means if the ball's sitting on the face longer, you can brush it more, which will result in more spin. And then if the grit and the friction are at the very edge of the limits, all three of those combined might produce an amazing amount of spin. Or who knows, maybe the 002 is also over the limit and it's going to get retested and then found out that it won't be legal anymore. I really have no idea, but I'm sure we're going to find out soon, and a lot of the paddle companies better watch out because I imagine a lot of them are about to be retested. Now, one of the other things that's going to be really interesting to see is, are the PPA going to follow these rules? Because they often abide by their own rules. I mean, they do generally follow a similar rule set as the USAPA, but they've not been afraid to go ahead and make their own rules. So are they going to make an exception for the Carbon? Are they going to listen, and because it's not on the approved paddle list, they're going to make people stop using it? Who knows? All this information is so new, and there's a lot of speculation, and people are trying to figure it out. But all you really need to know is that if you're going to do a sanctioned tournament, you are not allowed to use a Carbon paddle anymore. Okay, so since recording this, I did find a little bit more information. Someone who messaged Carbon directly got this response from them. I can assure you that we are working directly with USAP to rectify this situation. As it currently stands, we will be meeting with them early next week and will have more clarification on how we will be proceeding. I can assure you that we are taking the necessary steps to investigate and prevent future issues alongside the help of USAP. We will be able to shed more light on the situation and plans moving forward early next week after having our conversations. I appreciate your continued support and patience. We will make this right. We just ask for some more time so we can gather all the facts and get back to you. Another person who also messaged them directly got this response. Hi, hang in there. We are releasing a statement today. If a statement does get released today, I will make sure to leave that in the comment down below so that you can stay updated. And like I said, if enough new information gets released, I will make another video about this topic. But for now, let's all try and wait before we point fingers. Again, everybody is making a lot of assumptions about the situation, but no one except for CRBN and USAP actually have the information about what the issue is. For all we know, maybe next week the paddles will all become legal again and there was some kind of misunderstanding. No one has any idea, so let's all just wait for some more information, and once we know, then we can go from there. If there's any other news that comes out about this, I will absolutely update you guys. I will put that in the comments down below, and if there's enough new news, I will just make another video about it. But I did want to make this video for you guys because if you were on the fence about buying one, you might want to not buy one until news clears up a little bit, because it would really suck to buy a $180 paddle that you can't use in tournaments. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.